Welcome to the GRN, the Growth and Resilience Network, and the latest episode on our podcast channel. I'm Steve Piscitelli, your host, coming to you from my headquarters, my world headquarters, here in Atlantic Beach, Florida. My May 2019 podcast episode examined band dynamics and cohesiveness. I had the honor to hear the give and take of three longtime musicians, Brother John Mortensen, Crucial Eddie Cotton, and the legendary Roy Peak. Three male musicians. After I put the wraps on that episode, all three of them had suggested I do a similar podcast from the perspective of the women in a band. So here we are. And today I'm fortunate to have three muses of the mic, three forces of nature, three wonderful souls sitting in the GRN studio. Now and they're female. No males today, except for me. Even Roxy the Wonder Dog, she's here. We have one of these forces of nature who is coming in a little late to the studio. She had a last-minute request from a family to do a special event. And one of our forces of nature has to leave early. So, it is like the band members on stage, just kind of taking different leads. But we're going to flow with that. We're going to riff with that. They're going to share with us today what it takes for a band to be successful, the components that must fall into place, and is there a female perspective when it comes to these dynamics? Do women in the band face different challenges? How do they go about identifying and carrying out a vision for their bands? Now, at the end of all of my podcasts, I give the listeners a call to action, and I'm going to give you a little look into the call to action this time. Based on what you hear from my guest today, I'd like for you to consider a particular community with which you work or where you live. And whether it concerns itself with political action, elimination of a food desert, connections for shut-ins, or literacy training, does a clear vision exist? Just like a band needs a clear vision. Are we a blues band, Americana band? What are we? Or is your community just a bunch of pieces and parts of an amorphous being? So what lessons can you draw from these leaders of the band today? So again, with Roxy the Wonder Dog, here in the GRN studio, from my world headquarters, with black coffee, fresh fruit, and other goodies, let's welcome these three inspirational beings, the muses of the mic, my podcats. All right, I'm done. All right, let me introduce the two who are sitting with us. We have Tamara Colonna. She's been a musician in Jacksonville for more than 25 years. Now, that's Jacksonville, Florida, during which time she has performed with various groups and in various genres, from blues to Americana. She's currently a member of Dixie Rodeo, with her musical partner, Bill Gibson. And, ladies, what I'd like for you to do, if there is a website or any other way for people to find out more about you, please don't be shy. Let us know. Okay. While Tamara loves performing and writing, she gives her offstage soul to the local music scene in Northeast Florida. Whether supporting musicians, other artists from the audience, or organizing musicians to raise money for local causes. She lives, breathes live, local, and linguistically talented music. One of her fellow musicians, when I reached out and told this musician that Tamara would be a guest, well, this is what the musician said. Tamara is a true musical poet. Her lyrics are sincere and heartfelt. Oh, so, Tamara, welcome.
Thank you.
And across from me, we have Lauren Fincham. Lauren is described also by a fellow musician as, quote, one of the underrated songwriters and musicians in this area. Her songs are magic. Her voice a dream. Her guitar playing is extremely focused and passionate. She has loads of rock and roll in her soul. End of quote. A southern urban folk rock artist, Lauren Fincham, has shared the stage with the likes of John Mayer, Gamble Rogers, and Toad the Wet Sprocket. Toad the Wet Sprocket. Right. She has been featured on independent stations across the U.S. and abroad, and she tells me she was a Jacksonville Super Bowl performer. That would have been, 2005? Yes, okay. For the Westwood One?
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. A Folk Alliance Oasis featured artist and a TEDx musical guest. We share something there. I did a TEDx also, not music.
Wasn't it fun?
It was. It was a blast. She has a 4-album discography, and that spans nearly 2 decades of collaboration, friendship, and visual artistry. You can find it on the usual online music outlets. She's currently performing solo and with My Monster Heart, which she calls her evolving band. I like that, evolving band. Guitar player better not miss a lick. You might evolve right out of the band.
Well,
All right. And she says she's still looking for that ever-elusive perfect cup of coffee.
Right here.
Well, welcome. And again, we have a third. Hopefully we'll be able to make it. But we're going to start digging in because Lauren has to leave early, as I mentioned, so we want to get her take on some of these before she runs from the studio. So I'm going to start with, building on my opening remarks, what is the DNA for an extraordinary band? All right? Is there a secret sauce for band longevity, for the evolution of the band? Mm-hmm. Is there an X factor? So whichever microphone wants to come in.
Well, I think,
Lauren.
whatever, you have to have the simpatico and the same vision as whoever you're playing with. You have to, you're either in it for the money or the love of the music. So to me, it's one or the other. So if you both have that focus, then I think it's going to be more successful. Either way, you will play more.
Absolutely. I think you have to have someone with you that, like you were saying, has the same vision, the same goals, that wants the same out of the music. Also, you have to decide if you're going to be original music, cover band, whatever it is. Because that's also important.
That's part of the vision. I mean, it's I don't know if it's the vision of the band, but it's being on the same page. Why are we here?
Exactly.
Right. Now, is there, getting right to it, based on what the guys were saying after I did their episode, is there a difference if you're the female in the band, the woman in the band? Is there a difference, or you're a great guitar player, you're a phenomenal songwriter? That all that matters, or no?
Is it all that matters? Well, again, it depends on who you're playing with. I mean, I've played with some folks, or tried to play with some folks men who were, I felt disrespectful musically, not so much to me.
Explain that to non-musicians. Disrespectful musically.
Playing over what you're doing, playing over what everyone else is doing, playing too loud, playing too much, not really honoring the song, or the experience for the audience. That just showboating. That's, to me, what I mean by that. So.
And did you find that, Lauren, because the person was just a showboater, or because it was, that's Lauren and she doesn't really matter?
Oh, that's ego. Kind of both. I think I have found. I think some men just naturally, when they're working with other men, the other players will respect them more because they are men. Have you experienced that, Tamara? Yeah. So I have experienced that. But when I go through that, I go, okay, well, I can't play with that person because that's how they are, and that's not going to work for me. And it's not. It's not a dig towards them. It's just more like, this is where how they're oriented. It's not going to work for me. It's not going to work for them. Mm-hmm.
Tamara?
Absolutely. I want to read a Joni Mitchell quote that I had to write down because I love it. It says, "All my battles were with male egos. I'm just looking for equality, not to dominate, but I want to be able to control my vision." I think that's a beautiful statement because luckily for me, I've never had to experience this. I've been so fortunate with the bandmates I've had over the years, most of them male, that they have been more collaborative types and not domineering types.
Yeah.
And I felt that they gave me the space and room to be who I am. And it was an equal give and take. It wasn't, I'm better than you, I'm more important than you, so my songs are, out front and yours aren't. I've been very fortunate. I've heard other people have stories, and what Lauren mentioned, I believe, is true. It does happen out there. But thank goodness.
Disrespect.
Yeah, or just feeling more important, or, your stuff is okay, but mine's better, so I'm going to be out front. But I've never experienced that with the guys that I've played with, and I feel like I've been extremely fortunate, and I love all the male players I've always played with. So, it's something you do on purpose. You pick the people on purpose.
Exactly. And it's a vetting process, sort of, that's what it comes down to. And I have been, I think, just as fortunate as Tamara. I mean, I've played with some phenomenal players in this town. Very, very lucky. And it has been collaborative. Mm. And that's always when it works best. When they just go, so what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm doing this. And they go, oh, that's cool. I'll do this then, rather than, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm just going to play the same thing that I play over anything else. Some players do that,
Or no.
I've only played in a band with, I think, 2 or 3 other women. And I think one specifically had a little bit of what you're talking about. She was a viola player. And so she had been playing, when I lived in Atlanta, I played with her, Carol Statella, a very wonderful player. And she had played with the symphony and done some things like that and done a lot of session work. And I found her to be very intuitive and very much just constantly watching me. And when I hear her play on some of my former recordings, I actually hear that. I go, oh my God, she was so sympathetic to this song. Yes. So yeah, I think especially for her. The other 2, I didn't really get that feeling. It wasn't either good or bad. I didn't get that feeling.
And the same, did you ever get that sense with your male band members?
Oh yeah, definitely too,
so
for sure.
It's not gender specific.
I don't think it is with music. Do you think it is, Tamara? I mean, it can be. Again, there are definite male-female archetypes, no matter where you go, no matter what profession you're in. Would you think so? Yeah. And but I don't think it's no.
Okay. Not just.
No, so. There are some men who are just so intuitive. I mean, like Michael Pearson was that way.
Yeah, what I do know is when you play with someone for a very long time, like Bill and I have been playing for years and years and years now. You have that natural intuitive ability. I know Dickie Betts was talking about that with the Allman Brothers, how he would they didn't even have to speak words on stage. They just could feel each other's, where they were going and all of this, really cool stuff. And I was watching that going, yeah, I get it, because it's more about getting to know that person and them getting to know you. I mean, there's instances where I've, given Bill advice on a song and said, you know what, I think it'd be really good if you did this. And then there's times when he gives me advice, and it's reciprocal, and we respect each other so much that he could say, hey, that really stinks, I think you should change blah blah blah. And I listen to him, and my ego's not involved. I want the song to be good, and vice versa. So we really work together, and I think you just get that way with a musical partner, wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
Lauren?
I agree totally. Yeah.
There are 2 characteristics I found, and I recently heard it stated again in a forum I was involved with, that leaders first listen, and then they learn based on what they've heard, and then they lead. Can you apply that to your experiences in a band? Do you have rehearsals, obviously, so do you listen, learn what the other person wants, doesn't want, and then move on? Or is that, again, is it so intuitive and so ingrained you don't even think about it, you just do it because of respect for one another?
Oh, I hate this term, but it's a process.
It's a process.
I mean, really high level, that's how I look at it. I mean, it's like Tamara said, it's very give and take, and it depends on the person you're working with. I mean, I've had folks that they didn't want to rehearse; they just wanted to hear a song. So I would record an MP3, send it to them, and then we'd go out and play, and they would surprise me And that was kind of fun for me. It's like, wow, that's so wonderful. It's so exciting because you didn't know what they were going to do. And so you kind of take a chance on it and you kind of fly with them. As lead players, that's what they do all the time. I think a lot, so I thought, well, I'll be that way. I'll just take a chance too. So, yeah.
I think listening is very important. Bill and I have listening sessions regularly, and we listen to albums on vinyl, and we listen for things that we might have overlooked in our own recordings and our own, playing, and we go, oh, that sounds so cool there. Look how they put that little drum or that little beat right there, that, there. And I feel like listening is just as equally as important as performing because you learn so much. And I treasure that. I think that's really a neat thing.
I get lost sometimes in what someone else is playing, and I almost forget that I'm on stage. Or if you play with someone that's so into what you're doing, you just go, all right, I'm supposed to come in here because it's just so. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. I'll come back to it.
Well, that is cool though that you're on stage and it doesn't sound robotic what you just said, because if it was robotic you wouldn't really be here, you wouldn't be processing it. You'd hear it, you knew this was the note that now I come in on and it's bing bang boom, but you're now so, wow, that's good, and you're really appreciating what that person is doing.
That's whole part of the whole give and take. It's like, oh, they're going off, all right, well, I'm gonna go there, so that was something I had to learn.
All right, let's dig in on this piece. From your experiences, a quarter of a century or more playing music, what would you consider to be the top 3 obstacles that get in the way of that secret sauce, of the band moving forward? What are the stumbling blocks?
You have to have the same commitment. I mean, that's just the first one that comes to my mind. I mean, if you don't have the similar commitment, if you get people, if you are a band that needs to rehearse and someone's always blowing off rehearsal, well, that tells you right there, I don't have time for this. I mean, that's how I am, or if you're working with someone who just keeps canceling anything, then you just realize it's not working, move on. So that's one thing for me. I'm trying to think of 2 others.
The commitment.
The commitment, very important.
And the commitment comes about in showing up when you need to show up.
Right.
Tamara, obstacles that stand in the way?
I think along the same realm on that as that, obviously your values and beliefs have to line up. What you value, where your direction is going. I mean, like I said, you could be happy as a lark being a cover band, and that's all you want to do, as long as everyone's on board with that, and there's nothing wrong with that. As long as everybody's working towards that, makes everybody happy. That is on the same page. But if the only time I've ever left a group was to grow, so. For instance, I was with a group that was doing all cover music, and I wanted to do original music. So that caused me to leave that group because I loved them dearly, and it wasn't anything personal whatsoever. It's just I was ready for the next change and to move on, and they weren't at the same place. So gave each other all big hugs and wished everybody luck and moved forward. But I think that's the only time I have ever went out to leave a group was because I needed to change and grow, and the direction was different than what I was in currently. You find that?
Same thing. Yeah, I agree with you. And one more thing I just want to say, that cover bands sometimes get a bad rap, and not saying anyone here is saying that, but it's hard to be in a cover band, and it takes a lot of work and commitment. And one of the reasons I never did a straight cover band was because I don't think I ever felt like I could tap into a specific genre strongly enough to pull that off as a working cover band. So I tried to develop something unique that I thought I brought to the table
that fit Lauren.
Yep.
Yeah. And you'd mentioned basically like core values that you have to share in the band, and in the band, and I almost see that you were almost jumping up and down in your chair when she said that, the sharing the values and understanding that and having excuse me, in the bands you've been in, did you have in teaching you have faculty meetings? In corporate America there's staff meetings. Do you have staff meetings with bands? Do you have besides the rehearsal, do you ever just sit down and say, okay, we need to talk about the business of our band?
I think you do.
I think what I've realized as I'm doing things such as recording, performing, writing, I realized for me personally that I couldn't do all of that at once. So we did have a conversation about that. So when we're performing a lot, we're trying not to record. Or when we're recording a lot, we're trying not to perform as much, because I find myself spread way too thin, and then I'm not giving my 100% in that area. So we have had discussions like that, and also where are we going, where are we headed, what's next, how do we want to grow? And I'm all about growing as a group. So, how are we going to get our music out there? How are we going to, present ourselves? What opportunities do we want to take part in? How can we make Jacksonville a better place, which is why we do fundraisers. And the best part of that is getting all these wonderful musicians together that I would love to work with anyway, and working on a cause together. It's just a blast. So these are kind of the things that we do talk about a lot, and we've actually had band meetings separate from the practice just to talk about these things, because as you know, it's an organizational component that you really have to tackle almost separately. So, yeah, you got to make time for all of that if that's important to you.
Well, and it sounds like, going back to your previous example, that with the band you were with, and they're going down the cover road, and you were doing that with them, but at some point that wasn't nourishing your soul. So there was a sit-down moment.
Exactly.
And it sounded, in that case, it was very, it was, they were supportive, you were supportive, you remained friends, you hugged, and off you went, as opposed to you being stuck in something that was just draining you.
Absolutely.
Killing you. So you got to have that conversation. Our third muse of the mic, podcat has arrived. Let me introduce her. We got, her name, and as she tells me, the one who does the dishes in her home, she's known as Sarah Sanders, but everybody knows her by her stage name, which is the Mama Blue. And I'm going to give you a brief intro on her. One fan describes her thusly: Mama Blue is the sweetest, most soulful vocalist out here. Gets the crowd involved. A genuine love of people and her craft. Don't miss a show. Now, one of her band members shared this with me.
Oh, Lord.
In the quote, she seems to have the willingness and ability to make each individual feel like she is singing directly to them and sharing the same emotion they're experiencing in that moment. I'm actually choking back a tear as I type this person said. End to quote.
He gets a raise. Who is that?
And it's interesting because I wrote back to that band member and I said, you're talking about connections and how she connects with an audience. And I said, when I was writing my notes, the first thing was this. I said, if you ever see her, the first thing you will notice is her connection with the audience. She talks with them. She comes to them. She touches them in their souls. So when you see Mama Blue, you expect to be upfront and personal. Mm-hmm. So she is here with us. We're glad. I'm going to back up on a couple of questions. As I had said earlier, Lauren is going to have to leave us. She has an engagement to get to. All these busy women leaders of the band. Version 2.0. So, Lauren, before you go, wave, and then you'll say something else. And so, Mama Blue, in general, we were talking about, when I did this episode last month, when I recorded it, and it goes live this month. We're recording this in May, for those of you who are listening. This episode will go live in June of 2019. But the three guys that were with me, the three musicians, at the end, they said, you need to do a similar podcast with women in the band. And all three of them said independently that from their experience as males in a band, they said women at times will have a different experience. And sometimes it's because of the men in the band. So here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. So let me go to this question that I had already posed to Tamara and Lauren. When it comes to the dynamics of a band, are there gender dynamics?
Absolutely.
Tell us about from your
Absolutely.
experience. And
Okay. Wow. Well, for me, as far as gender goes, so I'm have to like really think about that because there's also personality dynamics, which
and
go
address
into
that as well.
The formulas of running a band, but the problems or the not problems, but the issues of my day are not the same as the issues of the guys in the band. Some of them, and I think I try to talk to them on their level, and that's not a bad thing. I just try to make things black and white, and it's very hard to do that in music. And also because I write most of the songs, if they're not covers, I've written them, and I feel that music a certain way. I'm a mother, I'm a woman, so I would think naturally I'm a little more empathetic, and I open up more to what the music means, and trying to get that across to the musicians is. I'm still trying to do that. We've been singing these songs for a while, but I think trying to convey it, they have to see me convey it,
When you said you get to their level,
yeah.
Explain a little more.
Okay, so to tell the guitar players, play this. This is supposed to be a sweeter sound, or to talk to them, and I'm not worried about the notes. I trust the music. If you hit a note, great, that's fine. I really don't care. As long as you're connected with me from the inside, the music will be fine. Trust it. Well, the guys are like, well, I need to play this A7th, this in Dorian, this and all of these chords, and they get really technical with stuff, and I'm like, are you serious? That's what I'm talking about. They're more, I find with my band, they're more interested in the technicalities and the chords, and if they're playing them right. Well, for me, if I feel it, it's right.
Right.
I don't get hung up on, the mechanics of it all. So that's where a lot of because I'm trying to convey emotion, and they're like, no, we are trying to get the notes, and just trust it.
That is interesting. So
and then after the gigs, they're like, oh, I should have played this, and I'm like, no, it was great. Everybody's happy. Don't go back. The moment is over. Don't go back. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. The biggest the dynamics there are, their focus is correctness, and my focus is emotional connectedness. That's where the music comes from for me.
And you mentioned empathetic, and Lauren, come on, jump in.
I got a scoot.
Oh, okay. She's got the scoop. Before you go, your website?
LaLaLaurenland.com.
I love it.
LaLaLaurenland.com.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Listen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And
I'm
know
sorry I can't stay.
That's
My
what happened
God.
when you're with three forces
Yeah,
of
no,
nature.
it's just
They always
starting.
got something going.
Yes,
It's amazing.
always.
All right, but you'll be able to. We'll check back in with you. And
Okay.
thanks for coming.
Thank you,
We really
Steve.
appreciate
This has been a lot of fun, really.
You could let yourself out of the studio. I know this is a labyrinth right here, going down the hallways.
I can
and
make my way.
corridors.
I'll find my way.
We
And,
always
if
do.
not, maybe the security guard will let you out.
You ladies have fun. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks. All right.
Take care. All right, so it's interesting what I was hearing there, this idea of empathy. Earlier, we had mentioned that I had brought up that I had found through experience and through some research, female doctors appearing to have more empathy. Not saying they are always more empathetic and there are no male doctors with that. Not saying that. However, there seemed to be, in the experience that I was sharing, there was the empathy factor. And then you went almost right to that. That it's not the You're not worried about whether or not the guitar player knows how to play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't, he wouldn't be in Mama Blue.
Right.
There's no doubt. It's the emotional connection.
Yes.
And as the leader in the band, then is that part of the tutoring and mentoring you have to do is that part of a band meeting?
No.
No.
No, it's not. I find that a lot of times we get hung up on how to say it and if it's going to be received the right way. But I find also that if my intention is to convey this message, I have to trust that it will be received correctly. You know, I think the guys in the band know me. They pretty much know me. They know that I never come from a place of hypocrisy or a place of cynicism. I really, that's just not my bag. So
place of authenticity.
I do always come from a place of authenticity. So yeah, I have bad days and good days. But when I'm talking to them about what's going on in the band, 9 times out of 10, I'm rattling it off to get to the music, honestly, because that's, if you don't do it, then it's not going to be genuine. It's not going to be authentic on stage. So I think the biggest issue I've really had with that is trying to get the guys to dress up a little bit more.
You mean their
yeah, on stage. That's like the biggest issue as far as is trying to be. Well, I get a little peeved at that sometimes. So, I think that's why they call me Mama Blue. I'm always flicking stuff off of them or wiping Cheetos off of them, or it's telling Omar, the drummer, I'm like, we need to vacuum this rug you have for your drums, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think they get where I'm coming from. I just want them to feel it a little bit more. And what I'm learning is that just because I'm looking for a certain thing, but it doesn't mean that they're not doing it because I don't see something I recognize. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Right. So, part of, we talked before, what's the it of a band that brings it together, keeps it together.
Keeps it together.
So it's not, there's communication, obviously.
Yes,
what you're talking about.
There's definitely communication.
Sometimes it's very blunt communication, right?
Yes. There's some. Yeah, I one night at a rehearsal, and this was a female-male dynamic. It was kind of ironic, and I'm not going to say any names. But we were at rehearsal, and I was like, let's try this song with a bossa nova beat. And someone said, just off the cuff, does she even know what a bossa nova beat is? And there were crickets. Somebody laughed. Somebody did laugh, but when they realized they were laughing alone, they were like, oh, okay, wait a minute. And I went on. I didn't even really address it, and I think the fear factor got even deeper and deeper, like, oh, crap, she didn't even say anything, and then I handled it later, but it was kind of like, in all my years, on one hand, I expected it. I expected something like that, because I have sang with a lot of, different bands, and most of them male-led. And then on the other hand, I was a little shocked because I'm like, wait, I went to college. Are you serious? I've been doing this for 30 years. Really? So and that's all I'm going to tell you about that story. Yeah. But that person is still in the band. I still love him and everything. It was just a little slip of the tongue, but I thought it was very interesting.
Did you take it as being dismissive?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. But, things happened and the moment was over. But in this climate, it's something that we need to be a little more open about and upfront about.
We were getting to, right as you were walking into the studio here, we were talking about your individual mentors for your band. I mean, your your musicians, your songwriters, your singers, your performers. Who were your mentors? I'm going to come back to Tamara. Who helped you understand these dynamics, even though you still have to stumble yourself along the way to figure some things out? Mentor?
I would say it goes way back to my high school course teacher, who was extremely professional, and he would not allow us to miss school or be late. And as a matter of fact, I was a secretary, so I had to be there every day. And when I missed a day, because I was literally on my deathbed.
Secretary of the band?
No, of the chorus.
The
I had
chorus,
to take roll every day. He called my mother and was quite upset that I was not there. So he taught me work ethic and professionalism. We had to be spot on for competition. We had to be perfect. He had extremely high standards for us. So I learned so much from him. And then he was really a second father to me. And then my own brothers had a band when I was growing up, and they used to practice in the Florida room in our house, and I used to watch them all the time, and I learned a lot about band dynamics. It was my two brothers, and one of my brother's girlfriends was in the band, and another guy, and I learned a lot from them because Karen Sutherland, who was my brother's girlfriend at the time, I would sit at her feet and go, I want to be just like Karen when I grow up, because she was beautiful, she could sing, and she was a dancer, and I just loved her. She had a sweetheart, and I was like, I want to be just like her. And and they weaned me on like Delaney and Bonnie, Crosby, Stills and Nash. I mean, all the good old music, and I just feel like that band inspired me growing up.
Cool.
Nice.
How about you, Mama Blue?
Wow. Well, I have to say, first and foremost, high school. Growing up at Douglas Anderson was such a gift and a blessing. Jane Condon, to this day, is still a great mentor of mine. Carol Grimes, we sit a lot, us three together, and go through, some of the issues that I'm going through right now, because I know where I am, and back in the day, Jane Condon was one of the only, female principals in town. So it was, we've connected on a lot of different levels, and there's a lot of parallels there with being the leader of a band. Shirley Sachs was her name when I was going to Douglas Anderson. She was my musical theater teacher. Kathy Murphy Giddens now, she was my vocal teacher in choir. Dr. Lee Beeger was the drama director. All of those women were, when I was in 8th grade, no, I wasn't having it. But now that I'm where I'm at, I can look back and see how they etched out, who I am today, as well as my mom, who took a risk on, sending me across town to this school that, we knew nothing about. I'm really grateful for her, to her, for taking a chance and trusting me. I saw the commercial. I was like, yes, I got to do it. So,
for people who might not know, it's Douglas Anderson School of the Arts.
Yes.
Public school in Jacksonville.
Yes.
It's a magnet school. And you have to, for that school, you have to audition, correct?
That's correct.
You have to have a talent.
Yes.
And you have to pass
the
audition. It's just not anybody gets there.
Correct.
And it's it's quite a training ground.
When I first had gone, I had no musical training, and to me, it was kind of like Fame. If I know I'm dating myself, but it was just like that. They left us to imagine and create, but they also guided us. And my work ethic, as far as being a band leader, I have to attribute to Peggy Elam, who I met at Jacksonville University, and then years later, she hired me to do a wedding in St. Simon's Island. And so that was 10 years ago almost. But she wanted excellence. She wanted me to be there on time. There were no excuses. And honestly, I can say it was maybe twice in 10 years that something happened to where I wasn't at the performance on time. So that has bled down into what I require of my band. But those women,
They said it.
they set the tone, and I'm grateful.
All right, now you mentioned the word, creativity.
Yes.
And I want to. So we're a little different track here. Do either of you meditate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I attempt myself, and I think most people who meditate understand the idea of mind chatter.
Yeah.
And getting that mind chatter just to somehow stop, or at least take a pause, hit the reset button. In a band with so many creative types, how do you help the band eliminate, minimize, contain that chatter? How do you do it? Mama Blue's about falling out, so I've hit a chord here.
I give them the look. I guess that's it. I get this look on my face, and it's almost like, okay, now it's time to get to work. There's a feeling. I'm grateful for meditation because the band could probably tell you, I don't have to say a lot. It's a feeling, and I think with that it gets us on track. We do our talking and everything, but after a while, I'll say, let's get started. And there's a feeling where, it's time. And I'm grateful for that because in the beginning, I was like, all right, guys, come on, and.
But if you're in mind chatter, how do you shut that down? Are you that disciplined yourself through the meditation, through the years, that you can just partition it, put it here? We have a show to do.
During rehearsal?
Yeah.
Yes.
A song to write. Off to the, you're able to do that.
I'm able to do that in rehearsal. And then after we leave the studio, it just all like comes back in. And then at home, I a lot of ways that I usually at about 2 to 6 in the morning is where I get to write. And that's because of the chatter and everything that's going on. To me, that's the time of day where, or night, whatever you want to call it, that's when there's silence in my mind and in the world. And I feel that in my world. In Jacksonville, I don't think anything is going on at 2 or 6 in the morning, but I feel that. And there's a calm. And then I sleep from about 6 to 8:30, and then I'm up and doing it again. But I have to take that time, and it seems like in order for me to write, the universe has to be peaceful at a certain, and it happens to be the time of day when we're sleeping. Others are sleeping, I guess.
How do you do it?
I've been doing transcendental meditation for 6 years. It was a gift I gave myself when I met Prudence Bruns, who the Beatles wrote Dear Prudence about.
Nice.
I got the honor of meeting her here in Jacksonville, and she talked to me about transcendental meditation. And that's
Say the name again, please.
Prudence Bruns. She's Mia Farrow's sister, and she was with the Beatles, with the Maharishi in India, and she did her training with them, and they wrote that song about her when they were training together. And she was such an influence on me, and I went ahead and got training in that, and I do TM. I've been doing TM for a long time because I think it is important to quiet your brain. Mm-hmm. But what I love about music is I don't have to worry about that because music puts me in such a zone that it is a form of meditation. Mm-hmm. So, and my musical partner's the same way. When we get together, the world goes away. Like, we are so focused on the music and so in that moment of performing or practicing or whatever, that it seriously is a form of meditation. I'm sure you can relate to that.
Agreed.
And it's just, music is the one way that I can shut the world off. And so I love it so much for that, as well as meditating, because I agree that you've got to have quiet space, especially if you want to create. and you got to shut all the voices down. And so that's the way I do it for sure with TM.
From the band perspective, does diversity play out, or is it strictly about I can connect with you, you have the musical talent, let's play?
It seems to happen naturally for me, and I'm going to go from the surface deeper. And I'm trying not to use too many words because that's why communication with my band is so, because I use a lot of words. Okay, so when you see my band, it is diverse. Anyway, I met my drummer through another friend of mine, and he is from Puerto Rico. And he was just learning the language when we met about 8 years ago, something like that. So we've grown together. He was a newlywed, and now he has 2 children and a house, and that's been great. I also have a couple of Caucasian guys in my band, and every once in a while I'll have an African American in my band. So on the surface, it looks diverse, but it was not intentional. I think that when you get that connection, when you feel that connection, diversity kind of falls on the wayside. It just happens naturally, just like, I expect you to be breathing if I'm playing with you, or, that kind of thing. And also with the audiences, I don't set out to be diverse, but the music brings it connects to different things in us human beings that it just happens automatically. I wrote a pretty controversial song to some, and it's called Brown Skin Blues, and I was so afraid to sing it because it pertained to the things that I would have to tell my son as an African American looking young man who happens to be German and African American. I happen to, tell them that as far as diversity goes, that kind of comes naturally for me. I happen to hit all the bases because I do have biracial children. I am an ex-military wife. I'm a teacher. I used to be a social worker. So my background kind of welcomes diversity. Yeah. So it doesn't happen to be something that I set out to create.
Tamara.
I agree with that. I think that, I also am very inclusive of people. I'm a teacher, so I've been around all kinds of people all my life, and that goes way far back. But I just think that music tends to, people tend to naturally gravitate towards that, and as well as the audience. So it's not something you have to try to do. You can be open to it, be inclusive of it, but it seems to happen beautifully and naturally, which is one of the other wonderful things about music. I mean, look at all the bands that have had, diverse group members over the years. It just is a magic when they get together.
Yes.
Once again, they have common beliefs, they have common direction, they want to grow in a certain way. So that's what brings them together, not so much that they're so different, but the differences are really wonderful when you can bring them all out and work together.
If you were able to you were called on to mentor a band. You're the mentor, not to be in the band, and not even to be the manager or the agent, but they're saying it could be young folks, it could be people my age that decided they finally want to get out of the garage. All right. What is it, where would you start? If you had to hit one or two issues. I mean, I know you've talked about discipline. That might be it. Do bands today need different mentorship, different leadership than, say, the bands that started 10, 20, 30 years ago? Are there different issues that they have to deal with today? Where would you start? We'll start with Tamara. Where would you start?
I would say in many ways it's easier today because you have the internet, you have YouTube, you have all these wonderful outlets for young bands. I mean, I can think of a handful of bands that have become famous just by posting on YouTube. So, or, getting that buzz going, putting on Facebook. I mean, I just saw Larkin Poe last night and they're huge now. And they've started out just doing videos on Facebook.
So you'd
and
help them get
YouTube.
connected appropriately, meaningfully, authentically on social media.
I think that's a huge part of it today. I think absolutely they have to have talent, number one. That's the given right there. And then they have to have a vision of where they want to go, what they want to do, how they want to get there, be on the same page, be willing to work for it, basically. I mean, that's what I'm seeing with these young groups out there. Greta Van Fleet is another example. They, started performing. They're 18-year-olds. Got a buzz going, and now they're opening for major acts all around the country. They're performing here in Jacksonville. They're doing their own show. They are the act. So I think in many ways it's easier, but you got to have the talent, the commitment, the discipline we were talking about. You got to be on the same page, and you got to have a vision of where you want to go.
You're sharing these core values that you had mentioned earlier on, and that's part of forming the band initially.
Absolutely.
What would you say, Mama Blue? What would you're mentoring the new band?
Mentoring the new band. Well, I can learn some things from the internet myself. I'm actually delving into that. But mentoring a new band, I would ask what your intention is, and do you all have the same intention? Yes, I mean that has to be it. I mean some bands' intentions are to just be famous, But for me personally, it's very important to know what your intention is, and does your music support that intention? I think a lot of bands these days, it's like, well, it sounds great, and they want to get out there, but it's very important to know what your lyrics do to someone else. How they make that person feel, and is that intentional? Do you want someone to feel like they are included and they are, a part of something good, or do you want to instill something that is, the other? Yeah. So that's very important. Once you do that and trust your music, then that's when the discipline comes in and all of that. And are you guys willing to do this as a team? It is very important that if you're going to be a band, you're a band, and everyone has a job to do. Leader is a strong word, as I am the leader of the band. However, everyone has a job to do, and if someone doesn't do their part, we're all depending on them. So you see a lot of bands break up, and things happen. That's very important. Think about that before you get started. Who is going to do this? Who is delegated to do this? And make those decisions together and get stuff written down on paper.
So you're big into contract?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. That's something to pay attention to if you're listening to this. Yeah.
You've got to treat it like what you want it to be. And I know what Mama Blue is. So I have to treat it with that kind of respect. Yeah. And it is business as well. It's business and pleasure, and there's just, you got to figure out the chemical, formula to make that happen. Yeah. And that's where, the magic begins.
And interesting, and you haven't heard this yet because it goes live this month in May, the podcast I recorded with John, Eddie, and Roy, that came up a number of times. Know why you're doing what you're doing, and contracts. It's more than just knowing that you're a great musician. You better have the business part down.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's tough. It's tough.
Did they teach you any of that? I know it was high school, but the DA, because it's only high school. Well, I shouldn't say it's only high school, but it's not. How about college? Nothing.
And I went to JU on a vocal performance scholarship, but that is where I am behind the curve as far as, music goes. It's great. I'm here. I've done a lot of things, but now I'm looking at contracts, and it's a tough thing to look at your band who you've been playing with for years and years and, not thinking about taxes and 1099s and, CPAs and contracts and all of that. But, there comes a time when you say, this is business. We've created something so great. We've got to protect it and protect one another. Yeah. So, you got to sign the dotted line.
Well, and it's also, I think it was Eddie talking about it in the other podcast, that it's right down to who's going to set up the drums, who's going to unload the truck, who is going to lay out the cables, and you know that going to the gig. Mm-hmm. You know it. It's not like, okay, I'm just here to play and flip my hair.
Mm-hmm. It was like that for a long time. It was, I'm just like, I expect you guys to do this and do it. And they have thus far. However, people doing this as long as I have with the people that I have, you realize that things change. Yeah. And people's their end goals change. And you have to be able to, just ride that wave and say, okay, well, I expect this. Can we meet at the, you're always changing your goal. You're always changing the contract, frankly. And luckily, we've gotten to the point where somebody else does the cables and the microphone.
Thankfully, yes. Well, it's what's cool about you coming in after the Lauren and Tamara and I have talked is that this isn't scripted, and you're saying things. You're just reinforcing what the other two have said, which is really, I think, cool. Mm-hmm. So there is a commonality that if you're in a band, pay attention to what these experts are talking about. You've learned about it. All right, last question. All right, and it's kind of open-ended, but in a brief amount of time, what else would you like to say that you hadn't had a chance to say? What else would you like to, or reiterate about this idea of, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about the diversity in a band, the potential for gender dynamics, the potential for, as Lauren referred to, musical disrespect, discipline. Is there anything that you want to reiterate, or is there something that you haven't had a chance to say and you just want to get it out? And then the other thing that you put in there, where can the audience find out more about you? A website, Facebook, or whatever. Tamara, we'll go to you.
I just would love to say on record that I would like Jacksonville, Florida, to own up to the fact that we have one of the best music scenes in the country here in Jacksonville, and that we need to come together and promote and support these groups like Mama Blue that we have here that are so phenomenal. I travel all over to hear music, and I'm a big proponent of local music and supporting local music. And I just want to say I am blown away. I go out there, I've seen young bands like Ivan Pulley Band, Custard Pie, Firewater Tent Revival, Bonnie Blue. I mean, I could go on and on with these bands. They are so on fire, and we have such talent in the blues community as well as all these other genres. And we need to own Jacksonville as a music town that it really is and start promoting it as a music town. And that's what I'm here to talk about as well, because it's one of my passions. I go to Macon a lot, Macon, Georgia, and they do such a good job of telling everybody in the world what a great music town they are. Yes. I want to be like that. I want people to come here and go, man, I was in Jacksonville. I saw this awesome band, Mama Blue. They were phenomenal. We need to go back there. Here's some more music. That's what I hope. That's my vision.
Where can we learn more about Tamara?
You can find us on Facebook and Reverb Nation, Dixie Rodeo.
Dixie Rodeo.
Dixie Rodeo.
Okay, Dixie.
And that's myself, Tamara Colonna, and Bill Gibson.
All right. Thank you for being here.
Nice.
Mama Blue.
I need to, reiterate that There's a lot of great music in Jacksonville. And actually, I just did a show with Walter Parks, who is from Jacksonville. J.J. Gray is from Jacksonville. Tedeschi Trucks Band. They land here every now and again from Jacksonville, but they call Jacksonville their home. This is a musical vortex that is rich. It is inviting. It is wonderful. I'm hoping, and it's my wish, that the venues in Jacksonville can see how important it is to respect the local musicians as they do the musicians that are coming from afar. The local musicians are not here to save the buck, because I actually think that a lot of us are better than some of the musicians that come from afar, and I think that we deserve, the same kind of I would say the music that we play deserves the same kind of respect and support. Good music, you can hear it online, anywhere, everywhere, but you can't feel it unless you come to a show. And that's where I live, at those live shows where you can connect and ascend from your eyes and your ears, and it goes deeper. And, a lot of times we laugh and we cry together. The local bands here are fire. I've been playing here for a long time. But now it's time to go afar, because that's how you survive. That's how you can make it. It's hard to do that here, not because of the number of bands, but because of the bass line that's always moving, because we don't really connect on a business level, which is just as important. We are troubadours of our time. Newscasters, they are able to survive as well as do their craft. Bands should be able to do that as well. It's super important. It would be great to pass those messages along as a musician and not be made to feel like, that this didn't take a lot of time, that the soul is, worth something more than just that one little second, It's very important.
Again, on the same page, isn't that something? Excellent. Mama Blue, thank you.
Thank you.
Lauren Fincham, who's already left, but thank you. And Tamara Colonna, thank you.
Thank
as
you
well.
for having me.
Remember what I had said earlier, folks, at the beginning of the podcast. Consider a community in which you work or live, a community that's important to you. And again, whether it concerns political action, elimination of a food desert, connections for shut-ins or literacy training, does a clear vision exist? You were hearing that from our guest today. Or is it just a bunch of pieces and parts of an amorphous being? What lessons can you draw from the leaders of these bands? Thank you again for joining us. Oh, Mama Blue, your website.
www.mamabluesings.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, very good. So check these entertainers, performers, songwriters, musicians, connectors of the souls. Check them out. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Without you, there is no Growth and Resilience Network. And I thank you for sharing our podcast with family, friends, colleagues, community leaders. You get more information on this podcast and others at stevepiscitelli.com. And while there, you can check out my latest book, Community is a Safe Place to Land. Until we meet again, either virtually or somewhere in person around this great nation, this is Steve Piscitelli from my world headquarters with Roxy, the Wonder Dog, reminding all of us to choose well, live well, and be well, and continue to create, share, and savor powerful moments. Bye-bye, folks. That was good, folks. You did well.
Wow.
I would have expected you to do well.